So how concerned should we be in the fall across North America? Application amount of acres that were applied with urea were down. How concerned should we be this spring about farmers being able to get supply? Never mind, what the price is, just being able to actually get physical inventory.
Well, I am a little concerned that there could be the possibility of what I'll say would be spot outages. In other words, it's going to kind of vary by region. It's going to vary by what the weather does. If we have a late wet spring like we had in the U.S. this past year and all, that's going to cause all kinds of problems because farmers are going to need to get in early, get their ammonia down, which they weren't able to get down this past fall, if they're going to put ammonia down. If you look at the situation right now we're facing, is what are farmers going to plant? USDA just came out with a big report that said, hey, we got a lot more corn in stocks than we thought we were going to. So what we're beginning to look at now is that corn acreage from last year to this year may not change much in the U.S. We also saw a situation where we get 4 million acres less wheat in the U.S. than we had last year. So that's taken a little pressure off fertilizer applications as well, because that's 4 million acres of crop that they don't have to put nitrogen on this spring. So we've got a situation there where farmers are kind of looking at what crops to grow and what that's going to mean in terms of whether they need to buy more fertilizer or not. And the situation in the U.S. particularly is probably we're going to see more soybean acres, because again of the uncertainty, the volatility and all. It costs less to plant an acre of soybeans than it does to plant an acre of corn. And so right now the profitability looks about equal. If you look at November 09 beans and December 09 corn, that price ratio is about a break even for most farmers. And the uncertainty though is going to push some farmers even into more soybeans.
You've had a chance to look at the Canadian situation. I'm sure you did a little bit of studying up before you came up here. Any differences between what's happening in the States and what's happening in Canada in regards to fertilizer supply or demand, or is there anything specific that you can make comment on about what's happening in Canada?
Well, no, it's very similar. You've got a little bit different cropping situation, of course, particularly in Western Canada. Your decision makers here are the main ones are typically wheat or canola. And so canola takes more fertilizer, and also if you're at a price point for a farmer that it's about equally profitable, and yet you can say spend less on one crop than the other, that may push you more toward that crop as well. You don't grow a lot of soybeans out here, in fact virtually none in Western Canada, some in Eastern Canada, so that's really not part of your situation. But you look at the price relationships between wheat and between the oil seeds and so forth, and that's what a farmer's going to look at individually to make his own determination.
Are we still seeing differences in fertilizer prices between the United States and Canada?
Well, nearly every region in North America, there's much more of a distinction than just between the U.S. and Canada. Western Canada has got a different situation than Eastern Canada. The Pacific Northwest in the U.S. is completely different than the Southeast in the U.S. So it's hard to say that globally across North America we're going to see something happen, because white wheat growers in the Pacific Northwest are looking at a different situation, than soft red winter wheat growers down in the Southeast. So it's almost impossible to make a blanket statement like that. Overall, I think that what we're going to see is we are going to see probably a cut in demand for across the board. I think we're going to see lower application rates for both phosphate and potash this year, particularly from farmers that have got sufficient soil levels that they can do that without impeding their production capacity. Nitrogen is going to depend on what crops end up getting planted. In the U.S., like I say, if we see flat corn and more soybeans, then we'll probably see no growth in nitrogen down there. In fact, there'll probably be a cut in nitrogen because we got less wheat.
On the wholesale price, can we do a comparison on just what's been happening with wholesale prices for nitrogen and phosphorus, say at Florida or New Orleans?
Well, yeah, and that's another big factor is the area that you're talking about. Right now we've seen $125 a ton ammonia, in the Gulf Coast, while we're still seeing $1,000 a ton ammonia in some parts of the Midwest and in Western Canada as well.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's kind of an extreme example, but that's the situation we're looking at now. If you've got an area where fertilizer dealers stocked up on high-priced inventory, they're going to be a lot more reluctant to let prices go down than an area where a fertilizer dealer may have said, I'm just going to wait, and he's bought it at cheap prices and all, and he's able to go out there and get that first level of sales because he's maybe willing to cut the price a little bit more.
Yeah.
But that again is going to vary by region. There's going to be 4 or 5 regions in the U.S. plus at least 2 regions in Canada where all of this is going to be taking place, but really kind of in a microcosm of that one area.
So it sounds like this would be a year to shop around.
Yes, definitely. What I'm going to tell farmers this evening when I give my presentation and all is that some farmers will be better off waiting a little while to see if their prices in their area could come down a little bit more. But some farmers, if they think the profitability issue has been covered and that they can make a profit at current prices and all, they probably want to go ahead and start buying some fertilizer, because with the big production cutbacks we're seeing across the board, worldwide in nitrogen, phosphate, and potash, there could be a situation where farmers don't get all the fertilizer they want this spring.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
But in the U.S., we've seen prices come down about half from the record levels that they hit
For phosphate. Yeah.
For phosphates. Whereas potash, we've seen them come down some, but maybe only 20% or so. Like I say, the potash market has probably done a little bit better job of controlling their inventories. That's kind of the situation we ran into with phosphates, is that they were producing for a certain level of consumption, and prices got so high that we saw some demand destruction. And so all of a sudden we've got less demand, so we've got a little bit more inventory situation than they would like to have seen, and that's what causes prices to go down.
And that's phosphate. I know in Western Canada, that's one input that you could probably greatly reduce for a year, or even skip for a year.
If a farmer has a good level of fertility built up in his soil, he can definitely cut back, yes.
Whereas nitrogen, you probably want to keep
Nitrogen, nitrogen you don't want to cut back on it if you can help it at all, because it's a much more immediate impact on the plant itself. But if you've got good soil fertility levels built up, and that's what I think we're going to see when this fertilizer year is over, the July 1 through June 30th fertilizer year. I think when this year is over, we're going to see that there was some application rate cutbacks for both P and K.